The evening air in California was unusually cold when Daniel Carter's black luxury car slowly approached the tall iron gates of his mansion.
What happened?
The sky was painted in shades of deep orange and purple as the sun disappeared behind the hills.
Let me go!
Daniel, one of the youngest tech billionaires in the United States, had just returned from a demanding business trip in New York. His mind was still occupied with contracts, investors, and endless meetings. All he wanted now was silence. As the security guard opened the gates, the car headlights swept across the driveway, and that's when Daniel noticed something unusual near the edge of the stone pathway. At first, it looked like a pile of discarded clothes. But as the car moved closer, he saw movement. "Stop the car," Daniel said firmly. The driver immediately pressed the brakes. Lying on the ground was a young woman. Her hair was tangled, her face pale, and her clothes torn. One of her hands rested weakly against the cold pavement, and there were visible stains of blood near her shoulder. She looked unconscious. Daniel's security team rushed forward cautiously. "Sir, this could be dangerous," one of them warned. "It might be a trap." Daniel stepped out of the car anyway. The cold wind brushed against his tailored suit as he walked toward her. He had built his empire by being careful, strategic, and sometimes even ruthless in business. But this situation was different. This wasn't a negotiation or a calculated risk, it was a human life. He knelt beside her and gently touched her wrist to check her pulse. "She's alive," he said quietly. Her breathing was weak but steady. There was a deep cut near her forehead, and bruises marked her arms as if she had struggled to escape someone. Daniel felt a strange tightening in his chest. Who would leave someone like this outside his home? "Call the house doctor immediately," he ordered. "And bring blankets." Within minutes, the woman was carefully lifted and carried inside the mansion. The grand entrance hall, filled with crystal chandeliers and marble floors, felt oddly silent as they brought her in. It was a world of wealth and perfection, completely opposite to the broken figure in Daniel's arms. As they placed her in one of the guest rooms, Daniel couldn't help but study her face. Even beneath the dirt and injuries, there was something familiar about her features. He couldn't explain it, but it unsettled him. The house doctor arrived quickly and began examining her wounds. "She's been through trauma," the doctor said seriously. "Physical and possibly emotional. She needs rest and care." Daniel nodded. "Make sure she gets everything she needs." He walked toward the window and stared into the dark night outside. Questions filled his mind. Who was she? Why here? Why his mansion? For years, Daniel had lived a controlled and predictable life. Every deal, every partnership, every move was carefully planned. But this was unexpected. Random, uncontrolled. And somehow, he felt this moment wasn't an accident. He didn't know her name. He didn't know her story. But deep down, Daniel Carter sensed that bringing this injured stranger into his home would uncover secrets far greater than he was prepared for. The next morning, soft sunlight filtered through the tall glass windows of the guest room. The peaceful surroundings of Daniel Carter's mansion felt almost unreal compared to the nightmare the injured woman had endured. Machines softly beeped beside the bed as she slowly began to move. Her eyes fluttered open. For a moment, she looked confused. The ceiling above her was white and elegant, not the dark sky she remembered. The bed beneath her was warm and comfortable. Panic suddenly filled her expression as she tried to sit up. "It's okay," a calm voice said. From across the room, Daniel had been standing near the window, watching quietly. He had barely slept the entire night. Something about her presence kept him alert. "You're safe," he added gently. The woman looked at him cautiously. Her voice was weak but steady. "Where am I?" "You're at my home," Daniel replied. "You were found injured outside my gates." She hesitated before speaking again. "My name is Emily." Daniel studied her carefully. Even cleaned and treated, bruises were visible on her arms. A white bandage rested against her forehead. She looked fragile, but her eyes held strength. "What happened to you, Emily?" he asked. She swallowed nervously. "I was attacked. I was trying to get away." "From who?" She looked away, her fingers tightening around the blanket. "I can't say." Daniel wasn't used to unanswered questions. In his world, information was power. Silence meant risk, but he noticed genuine fear in her expression. She wasn't hiding something for manipulation, she was protecting herself. "You don't have to tell me everything right now," he said calmly. "But if someone hurt you, I need to know whether you're still in danger." Emily's breathing grew heavier. "They're looking for me," she whispered. "I didn't have anywhere else to go." Daniel frowned slightly. Why my house? For a brief second, something changed in her eyes, hesitation mixed with something deeper. Recognition. I saw the gates. I was desperate, she replied quickly. Daniel sensed she wasn't telling the full truth. Yet he decided not to push further. Not now. Over the next few days, Emily remained inside the mansion under medical supervision. She moved slowly but refused to appear weak. Daniel noticed how she would study the paintings on the walls, especially the large portrait of his late father displayed in the main hallway. Once, he caught her staring at it longer than expected. Did you know him? Daniel asked suddenly from behind. Emily turned quickly, startled. No, she answered too fast. I just think I've seen his face before. Daniel nodded, though doubt lingered in his mind. Security around the mansion was tightened. Daniel ordered background checks, but strangely, no official records of Emily matched her story. It was as if parts of her identity were missing. One evening, as Daniel reviewed files in his study, he felt a strange realization creeping into his thoughts. Since Emily's arrival, something inside the mansion had shifted. The silence no longer felt peaceful, it felt heavy, waiting for something to unfold. He couldn't ignore the connection he sensed. Her familiar eyes. Her interest in his father's portrait. The fear she carried. Emily wasn't just a random injured stranger. And Daniel Carter was beginning to understand that whatever she was running from, it was somehow tied to his own family's past. 3 days passed, but the tension inside the mansion only grew heavier. Daniel Carter tried to focus on his company meetings and investor calls, yet his thoughts kept drifting back to Emily. There was something she wasn't saying, and he could feel it. Late one evening, Daniel walked down the quiet hallway toward his study when he heard a soft voice coming from the guest room balcony. It was Emily. I don't have much time, she whispered urgently into the phone. He doesn't know yet, but he deserves to. Daniel froze. He has a right to know about his father, she continued, her voice trembling. Daniel's heart pounded. His father. Without thinking, he stepped closer. Know what? He asked firmly. Emily turned sharply, her phone slipping from her hand. Fear filled her eyes, not fear of him, but of the moment she had been avoiding. I didn't mean for you to hear that, she said quietly. Daniel crossed his arms, trying to remain calm. Start explaining. There was a long silence. The night air felt colder than before. My mother worked for your father many years ago, Emily began slowly. She wasn't just an employee, they had a relationship. Daniel's expression hardened. That's impossible. It's not, she said, tears forming in her eyes. He supported us secretly, financially, but he never told you. Or anyone. Daniel stepped back, disbelief flooding his mind. His father had always appeared disciplined, loyal, honorable. A respected businessman. A devoted family man. You're lying, Daniel said, though his voice lacked confidence. Emily shook her head and rushed inside, returning with a small folder. Her hands trembled as she handed it to him. Inside were documents, old letters signed by his father, bank transfer records, and most shocking of all, a birth certificate listing his father's full name. Daniel felt the ground shift beneath him. I found these after my mother passed away, Emily explained softly. She made me promise not to reveal it unless necessary. But after your father died, people who knew the truth started pressuring me. They didn't want this secret coming out. Who? Daniel demanded. Business rivals. Men who worked with your father. They think if this becomes public, it will damage the Carter legacy. They tried to scare me into silence. When I refused, they attacked me. Daniel's jaw tightened. Suddenly, everything made sense, the fear in her eyes, the missing records, her hesitation. You came here because of this, he said quietly. Emily nodded. I didn't come for money. I just wanted protection, and the truth to be acknowledged. Daniel walked toward the portrait of his father hanging in the hallway. He stared at the familiar face, the man he admired, the man he built his life to impress. Had he really lived a double life? Anger, betrayal, confusion, all battled inside him. Yet when he looked back at Emily, he didn't see an enemy. He saw someone who looked like him. The same sharp jawline, the same determined eyes. And for the first time, Daniel Carter realized the injured woman outside his mansion wasn't a stranger. She was his blood, and the secret buried for decades was no longer hidden. The mansion was unusually quiet the next morning. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, illuminating the grand hall where Daniel Carter stood silently, the folder of documents still in his hands. Emily sat on the edge of the couch, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, eyes downcast. The truth had been revealed, and now a delicate moment of reckoning had arrived. Daniel finally spoke, his voice steady but gentle. "Emily, I've gone through everything. The documents, the letters, the bank records. They're real. You're my sister." Emily's eyes widened, a mix of relief and fear crossing her face. She had spent years hiding, running from danger, and carrying the weight of a secret that wasn't fully hers to bear. And now, finally, someone believed her. "I didn't expect this, I never imagined I'd meet you like this," Daniel admitted, sitting down beside her. "My life, our family, it's all built on certain truths. And suddenly, everything has changed." Emily looked at him, tears welling in her eyes. "I didn't want to disrupt your life. I only wanted to survive." Daniel nodded. "And you did. But now, we can't ignore what's been done. The people who attacked you, the ones who tried to bury this secret, they can't threaten you anymore. Not while I'm here." He picked up his phone and immediately called his private security team. Instructions were precise: extra protection for Emily, surveillance of anyone who might approach her, and discreet measures to ensure their safety. While Emily's fear had kept her hidden for so long, Daniel's wealth and influence could finally give her the protection she deserved. Over the next few days, they worked together to uncover the men who had tried to harm her. Daniel's lawyers, investigators, and connections all came into play. It wasn't long before the threats were neutralized. People who once whispered in shadows were now exposed to the light. Through it all, Emily and Daniel began to build something more than just a sibling relationship. They shared meals, laughed at memories of their childhoods, imaginary ones, pieced together from stories, and found comfort in each other's presence. For Daniel, who had lived in a world of contracts and calculated risks, this newfound family bond was something raw and real. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Daniel and Emily stood on the balcony overlooking the sprawling estate. The mansion, once a symbol of solitude and control, now felt alive with warmth. "I never imagined I'd find a sister," Daniel said softly. Emily smiled, leaning slightly against him. "And I never imagined I'd find a home where I could finally feel safe." In that moment, both of them understood something essential. Life's unexpected events, even the frightening ones, could lead to connections far deeper than anything they had imagined. A random evening, a wounded stranger outside a mansion, it had changed everything. Emily's past was no longer a secret, and Daniel's life was no longer defined by solitude. Together, they were ready to face whatever came next, as family. Sometimes, fate arrives unannounced, broken, fragile, and unexpected. And sometimes, it brings not just survival, but a chance for a new beginning. The mansion, once quiet and cold, was now filled with hope. And for Daniel and Emily, this was just the start of their story together.